Erisco Foods Limited has faced controversy and demands for a boycott on social media after arresting a customer for what they termed an unfavorable product review, which has now sparked outrage from a number of Nigerians on social media. So just pretty much a summary here. The customer was arrested over a product review on Facebook. The FCCPC, the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, stepped in and issued a summons to Erisco Foods. There's no word so far from the Nigerian police, and the FCCPC has also secured the release of that customer. Let's take you through a quick timeline of what's been happening. This, of course, started off with a tweet that's from that individual, which essentially was what sparked this. And then we had a statement from the company, or rather, we can actually show you the product review from the customer herself, which was screenshot on Facebook, where she talked about this tin of tomatoes, which she said had too much sugar. Then the company released a statement saying that normally they would ignore the statement, but then it was what they termed a malicious attack from their competitors, although they didn't mention who the competitors were. Then we heard that she had been arrested, and then we had tweets from the head of the FCCP, the vice chair and CEO, Mr. Babatunde Irukara, where he said it had come to their attention and they are learning of the circumstances. He then provided an update in another tweet saying that indeed they had confirmed that she was in fact arrested and they had transferred the case to Abuja and by the police force. Then there were subsequently more interactions this year. Of course, really went viral. This for him saying that we're abusive and excessive towards each other. People in government and police are picked from this pool of us all, when someone was talking about how the police are being used for oppression. And then again, this was the latest update, grateful for the restoration of Ms Egodi's liberty, but determined to ensure we never walk this path again. Criminality in commerce is an exception. Our society cannot endure under the threat or fear that fair expressions, when properly so, can become subject of law enforcement. Now, the Punch newspaper apparently got to speak with the spokesperson from Erisco Foods Limited, and they did have a quote from them where they attempted to justify this arrest, saying that they went to the police under the guise of if there was any criminality. I hope we have the quote from the Erisco spokesperson. Okay, we don't have that quite yet, but we'll get that in a moment. But we're very happy to be joined by the Vice Chair and CEO of the Competition Protection Commission, Mr. Babatunde Irukara, who of course comes with decades of legal experience before joining the FCCPC, which of course includes that landmark negotiation and also prosecution of a multinational pharmaceutical firm that was involved in clinical trials in Nigeria. I think we all know who we're talking about. Starts with a P. Sir, you're very welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you.
How did you get wind of this? Was it from that tweet or was it from complaints?
No, from the tweets. Actually, we have tools for market surveillance just to find out things that are happening in the market. And we have a dedicated service provider who gives us those feedback multiple times a day. And I also make it a point to check social media
yeah,
and other channels for gathering information. And I was actually traveling internationally, but I saw this. And it was a difference in time, but I got the whole team in the FCCPC onto it immediately.
Can you take us through the process after you found out about it, to interacting with the police and finding out that she was in custody?
And so when I found out about it, the first thing I did was to try and do some quick desk research myself. And I saw that I'd been tagged by multiple people that I needed to see this. And so my first response to that was, all right, this has come to our attention and we're engaging in some checks. By this time I'd woken people up and they were also looking to see what was going on. And early in the day, the very next day, we had a team led by the head of our Lagos office who tracked the information to Ogudu police station to and determine that she was indeed arrested, but she had been transported away from the station en route to Abuja at the time. And I mean, we felt we had the responsibility to at least keep people informed. And so we informed people that yes, we can confirm she's been arrested. We're trying to determine location. And once we knew she was headed to Abuja, we had a head office in Abuja begin to engage the police headquarters even before the subject arrived Abuja. We also were able to track family members, including a spouse, and we opened conversations with them and continued the engagement.
Can you tell us, you issued a summons to Erisco Foods Limited. So the summons was to them to what? To explain what was going on? Talk to us about that.
And so typically, when there are consumer protection or competition issues, we would generally open an investigation. And the reason, and the investigation can start by one of several ways. One of them is to issue an NCI, what we call a notice to commence an investigation. It could be by summons. Sometimes it's by securing a search warrant from a court and executing a dawn raid. In this instance, we thought an immediate summons for immediate appearance, bringing documentation, was going to be important. There were two things we needed to determine. First, to determine if the scope and extent of the expression by the author of the post was fair speech, and we also needed to determine what role Erisco had in the arrest of the consumer. And so Erisco was the right person, and so we issued a summons, and a summons to produce documents and to appear, which Erisco immediately honored. They came in the next day with a bunch of documents and some testimony.
Okay, so I mean, so what happened? Because I assume there are penalties and fines for breaching competition, law. I mean, you can help me with that. Is that going to be the case here? What's going to be the outcome now?
So the investigation is still at its early stage. For instance, the statement alleges anti-competitive conduct, and so we're going to look at that.
Okay.
For instance, they make a statement that someone is concerned about their dominance, and dominance is a legal conclusion in competition terms. We have no evidence that Erisco is a dominant tomato paste maker or a food business at all from a competition standpoint. But those are things we would look at. We would slice the market into different segments and see if they dominate in any area at all. Now, with dominance comes certain responsibilities. You cannot act unilaterally. And so we determine if Erisco is dominant, we determine they've acted unilaterally, and we would also investigate their concern and allegation that there is a competitor who's trying to demarket their brand. We would conduct that investigation broadly. And the starting point is the information we've received from them. However, what was important immediately in the interim was determining whether Ms. Egodi should be subjected to any criminal process. And the evidence we've had, including the testimony from Erisco, was sufficient for us to again follow up with the Inspector General to say that we have absolutely no reason to believe that she's engaged in anything criminal to warrant arrest or criminal investigation. And because to the extent that you say that there's a criminal defamation, who's the victim here?
Right.
A brand is not a victim for as an element of criminal defamation. So I think certainly Erisco was ill-advised to consider pursuing law enforcement with respect to this. Both criminal conspiracy of a brand, damage of a brand is not criminal conspiracy. Anti-competitive behavior is primarily a regulatory issue. As a matter of fact, for anti-competitive behavior, we have an in-house anti-competitive department. We have investigators, which are made up sometimes of policemen, and we actually have the powers to prosecute in court. And so under those circumstances was a regulatory issue in commerce, something that should be added to a pretty large bucket of concerns that the police should have.
Right. Okay, we have that quote now. And I was going to read it off my phone, but we have it. I want you to, because this speaks to what you just said now. The spokesperson had an interview with the Punch newspaper, and what do you make of this? He said, this is Mr. Nnamdi Nwokolo is his name, the allegations were grave, so we petitioned the police to investigate the matter. So if the police find criminal defamation against Chioma Egodi, this is the individual who had the post on Facebook, and then arrest her, is it a crime that we sought the law? Well, what's your response to that?
Well, because I'm also an investigator and a regulator, so I'm taking this as it comes, and so I'm maintaining my independence and not forming any opinion. But a few questions that would arise in our investigation when Mr. Nwokolo sits in front of us. So when you talk about allegations, what allegations? Who's there? Are you an investigator yourself? Are you a law enforcement authority? Is Erisco a regulator? You're not, because you're talking about allegations that you received. So you're the alleger here. And so when you say they're grave, I understand how you feel they're grave, but the question now becomes, when you have a complaint, where do you channel it? Now, when people in society make the errors of how to channel their complaints, which is part of what we do in consumer education. That's understandable. But a company that large and sophisticated, you must have a full retinue of proper advisors, counsels, and everything to understand where things should go. Certainly, we haven't seen anything, including from their conversations with us, we haven't seen anything that justifies a criminal investigation at this point. Now, does that mean there won't be? I don't know that there won't be. And quite apart from the regulatory aspect of it, you must also proceed with some level of caution. Companies, whether they're general counsel and they're lawyers, they're risk managers. And a public relations person in a company is also a risk manager. You want to protect the brand, and the lawyer wants to diminish potential regulatory or other risk. And so when you see something, you must consider the best approach and how to proceed. I think it was ill-advised for the company to make such strong statements about what they considered a criminal. And in any case, the laws with respect to malicious prosecution are very clear. And so I would say, and I'm not the one who's going to prosecute or who's going to pursue a case in malicious prosecution, but if I were in-house counsel or outside counsel, I'd be very careful about articulating a statement in that manner. Because malicious prosecution is not just the police or the law enforcement or the prosecutors. It's also in part those who instigate it, and whether there was any reasonable basis or factual, a combination of facts that supported the alarm or the allegations or the report in the first place. And so you could be held accountable for even making a report if ultimately it was found to be malicious and was found to trigger law enforcement or judicial process inappropriately.
Okay, now I'm so glad that you're a lawyer with decades of experience. You've demonstrated it here. So can this individual in question, can she take legal action against Erisco Foods and the police? Because
I am a regulator in this matter,
right?
It would be wrong for me to provide legal advice.
Right.
But on a general note, on the rubric of our tort law, both from a case law, common law, and legislation standpoint, yes, it is possible that there might be potential theories of liability and a civil action.
What about the police in all of this? Because it was almost like you assumed that role as an investigator, as a regulator. Everybody was coming to you for this information. Meanwhile, within the question. So one, an official statement from the police. Two, your tweet about how Nigerians use, or rather, you were responding to a tweet from somebody else who said that Nigerians tend to use police to oppress others. Can you speak to that? Why haven't we heard from the police at this point?
Well, so for me. The thing about this is that, so you look at the police force, and they receive all kinds of things. And if somebody says there's a criminal conspiracy somewhere and the police action it, I'm not talking about how quickly they did or didn't, or whether that was incentivized or not. I'm not even going to get into that. But we must hold people accountable. Police, to some extent, have a level of immunity by the nature of their role. So just imagine, if the police force didn't take an allegation seriously and it ended up in a catastrophic outcome, we would say that the police got it wrong. And so I will not, and sometimes the amount of discretion that is required and the judgment call a law enforcement officer has to make are so critical and balancing all kinds of things. And so the greatest place where we need to modify behavior are those who would seek to use the law enforcement apparatus in matters that are truly not criminal. And that's my focus as a regulator. My role is to regulate commerce. I'm not going to regulate law enforcement. The police doesn't come under my jurisdiction for regulation. So I won't get involved in that. But we will not be in this situation if someone didn't attempt to use the police for this purpose.
We thank you for the actions you've taken and how quickly, how quickly the FCCPC with your leadership has attended to this. Are there any sacred cows? When folks saw that we're interviewing you, there were all kinds of questions on social media coming. So one of the questions I've been asked to ask you is, are there sacred cows? If there are big billionaires with companies that are flouting competition laws, will you act?
Well, let's put it this way. I don't know if there are any sacred cows. I haven't met one. In our work, whether in my role as a private practitioner before I got into government, certainly in my role in government, we've confronted the small, we've confronted the big, we've confronted monopolies, we've confronted dominant businesses. There's a businesses have paid over $100 million in penalties to the federal government on account of their anti-competitive or anti-consumer behavior. And I would say every step of the way, the leadership that I have had above me, I mean, I lead the agency, but I have political leadership above. You've got a minister, you've got the president, you've got a vice president, you've got all kinds of other people. Every step of the way, if there's ever been any question about what we're doing, what we've always been able to do is to present the facts, and there's never been a time when we're told to back down and not do our work.
Mr. Babatunde Erukara, Vice Chair, CEO of the FCCPC, we thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about this. Yes, and we'll be following the updates as they unfold. Thank you so much. You're a busy man, so we thank you for taking the time to come to talk to us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for inviting me.